Who are some of the most badass people in history? Hello Major. Dude turned down his first distinguished combat medal because he didn't like the general who was supposed to give it to him. All good though. He earned 2 more. A movie about him would be called too unrealistic if they made one. Christopher Lee. The actor behind Count Dooku, Saruman and many others, was a certified badass. Spy and Nazi thriller in WWII. Had a couple heavy metal albums as well. When Peter Jackson tried to instruct him for the death scene of Saruman, Christopher Lee just calmly corrected him that someone stabbed in the back can't scream due to the lungs deflating from puncture. He knew this from personal experience. Witold Pilecki. A man so badass that he voluntarily and secretly went into Auschwitz as a prisoner and spy to gather information. While there he regularly made reports on conditions and also organized resistance. As the war dragged on and conditions became worse, he then successfully broke out of Auschwitz so that he could personally convince his superiors of the truth, as they found his reports too ghastly to be real. Thanks for the double gilding. I'm just happy I have done some small part in keep the memory of this man going strong. Never forget. Never again. After he broke out as well, he fought in the Warsaw Uprising. Survived. And then after the war returned to Poland, which was already a risky move. Upon his return he started collecting evidence about Soviet war crimes in Poland and got arrested for that. The tragedy is of course that he was executed by the Soviets for this crime. And today it's not entirely known where he's buried. Wells Crowther. Aka the man in the red bandana. I'm sure most of us have thought about what it must have been like in the World Trade Center on 9/11, and it must have been debilitatingly petrifying. He was 24 years old working on the 104th floor as an equities trader. Made his way down to the sky lobby of the South Tower and found a badly burned woman. Carried her down 17 floors. Then went back upstairs to help guide others to the only possible stairwell. Stayed up there helping others and working with the fire department until the towers collapsed. He's responsible for saving around 20 lives and died a damn hero. His alma mater Boston College has a red bandana game every football season in his honor. Decals on the players' jerseys and the crowd all wears them. It is a really cool sight to see. Unnamed Viking from the Battle of Stamford Bridge in 1066. By the time the bulk of the English army had arrived, the Vikings on the west side were either slain or fleeing across the bridge. The English advance was then delayed by the need to pass through the choke point presented by the bridge itself. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle has it that a giant Norse axeman, possibly armed with a Dane axe, blocked the narrow crossing and single-handedly held up the entire English army. The story is that this axeman cut down up to 40 Englishmen and was defeated only when an English soldier floated under the bridge in a half-barrel and thrust his spear through the planks in the bridge, mortally wounding the axeman. Yup. His manhood was injured. I'm not even kidding. Olga of Kiev. This lady lost her husband, and when it was proposed she marry his made her. She was like, sure. Send a delegation over so we can talk this out, and they came. She had them dropped in a pit and buried them alive. Then she had another party of men sent to talk about the marriage. And they came. She said, hey. It was a long journey. Why not come relax in this bathhouse, and they did. She set the bathhouse on fire when they were in it. Then Olga went and sent the Dravillians another message. Hey, bring out the booze, I'm coming to mourn my husband's death in your city. She came. She mourned. She got the Dravillians drunk. And she had them held by her for hours while they were drunk off their asses. Olga went and got her army. Laid siege to the place where her husband was held for a year. Then told them, I'm willing to forgive and forget if you guys give me a bunch of birds, and the Dravillians did. They turned the birds into mini matches by attaching sulfur to their legs. And then released them. Set the city on fire. Freaking savage. Saint Olga is my favorite answer to this age-old question. Also belongs in one of those revenge subs. How many of those are there? She should go in one of the big ones. Michael Collins. Showed up 7 minutes late to negotiations for the Anglo-Irish Treaty in 1922. And when he was corrected said, "You've had 700 years. I'll take my 7 minutes." There is a great self-titled biopic about him starring Liam Neeson. I always felt Jonas Salk was pretty badass. The dude created the first successful polio vaccine and gave away the cure for free. I like this the most. Most people here seem to equate badass as soldier X killed X number of people during the Battle of X with nothing more than a teaspoon and a sachet of sugar. Jack Churchill, who fought in WWII with a longbow, claymore, and bagpipes, and said after the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, "If it wasn't for those damn Yanks, we could have kept the war going another 10 years. Jack Churchill. Edit. Forgot to add the citation needed episode about him. Jack Churchill. Jack Churchill. Better known Mad Jack, or as I like to call him, Sir Badass Extraordinaire. In 1940. Killed a Nazi with a longbow. Was shot on the neck by an MG in Dunkirk. Won the Military Cross for bravery after rescuing a fellow soldier after Nazi ambush. His commando invaded Nazi-controlled Norway and played his bagpipes as they landed. Subsequently lead his men ashore with his sword waving in the air. In Yugoslavia he was captured by Nazis and sent to a concentration camp. Later he escaped just to get captured again and sent to Austria, where he also eventually escaped. After WW2 he was deployed to Palestine, where he and his men helped rescue a Jewish convoy after being ambushed by Arab forces. Want more badass? He and 12 of his men marched under fire to the convoy. He claimed that as he marched he smiled like mad from side to side, as the enemy is less likely to shoot at you. The clear answer is Julia Child. This superwoman was a WWII spy. Invented shark repellent. Single-handedly brought French cuisine to America. Was over 6 feet tall. Was a best-selling author. Was a champion women's basketball player. Regularly went small game hunting. Was known as an avid prankster. The recipient of multiple Emmys. The French Legion of Honor. The Presidential Medal of Freedom. And honorary doctorates from several universities including Harvard. Was a dedicated wife. And is beloved worldwide to this day. Honestly, her Wikipedia page is an absolute roller coaster ride if anyone is interested. John Paul Jones. Ducking legendary pirate. He is my favorite lesser known American. Crazy bastard sailed all the way to England to fight. As if the thousands of British soldiers already in the colonies weren't enough for him to fight. Audie Murphy, WW2, 2DLT. Murphy commanded Company B, which was attacked by 6 tanks and waves of German infantry. 2DLT. Murphy ordered his men to withdraw to prepared positions in a woods, while he remained forward at his command post and continued to give fire directions to the artillery by telephone. Behind him, to his right, one of our tank destroyers received a direct hit and began to burn. Its crew withdrew to the woods. 2DLT. Murphy continued to direct artillery fire which held large numbers of the advancing enemy infantry, with the enemy tanks abreast of his position. 2DLT. Murphy climbed on the burning tank destroyer, which was in danger of blowing up at any moment, and employed its .50 caliber machine gun against the enemy. He was alone and exposed to German fire from 3 sides, but his deadly fire killed dozens of Germans and caused their infantry attack to waver. The enemy tanks, losing infantry support, began to fall back. For an hour the Germans tried every available weapon to eliminate 2DLT. Murphy, but he continued to hold his position and wiped out a squad which was trying to creep up unnoticed on his right flank. Germans reached as close as 10 yards, only to be mowed down by his fire. He received a leg wound, but ignored it and continued the single-handed fight until his ammunition was exhausted. He then made his way to his company, refused medical attention, and organized the company in a counter-attack which forced the Germans to withdraw. His directing of artillery fire wiped out many of the enemy. He killed or wounded about 50. 2DLT. Murphy's indomitable courage and his refusal to give an inch of ground saved his company from possible encirclement and destruction, and enabled it to hold the woods which had been the enemy's objective. Medal of Honor. And a film made about him, in which he starred. called to hell and back. He acted in over 40 films. Died in a plane crash. Alan Turing. SGT. Depressed pun of the Royal Gurkha Rifles. He took out 30 Taliban by himself and was awarded the Conspicuous Gallantry Cross. Chinese pirate Queen Qingxi. Led a huge pirate fleet of up to 400 ships and basically robbed and murdered whatever and whoever the duck she wanted. Her word was law. If you were on her crew, any disobedience got you beheaded on the spot. She kicked the big digs off of the Chinese Navy. She whooped British and Portuguese bounty hunters. Terrorized villages, killing the men and selling the women and children into slavery when their ransoms weren't paid. When she finally started losing fights to a technologically superior Portuguese navy, she cashed out. Took her loyal bloodthirsty pirate army to the Chinese government and suggested that they pardon her and her crew of all crimes and not try to confiscate any of their loot, or they were gonna do one more big bloody crime starting right here. She ran a brothel, gambling house into her old age and lived in luxury and power. Not only that, but she started out as a prostitute and maneuvered her way into the position of pirate queen after her husband, the pirate leader prior, was killed. She was a badass female at a time and a place where women were almost always subservient. Queen Boudica. Led an Iceni uprising against the Roman army. Reposting a comment I had on a similar thread a while back. How has no one said Giles Corey yet? He was accused of witchcraft along with his wife Martha Corey during the Salem witch trials. After being arrested, Corey refused to enter a plea of guilty or not guilty. He was subjected to execution by pressing in an effort to force him to plead, the only example of such a sanction in American history, but instead died after 2 days of torture as a result of his refusal to plead. On the 17th of September, Sheriff George Corwin led Corey to a pit in the open field beside the jail, and in accordance with the above process, before the court and witnesses, stripped Giles of his clothing, laid him on the ground in the pit, and placed boards on his chest. 6 men then lifted heavy stones, placing them one by one on his stomach and chest. Giles Corey did not cry out, let alone make a plea. After 2 days, Giles was asked 3 times to plead innocent or guilty to witchcraft. Each time he replied, more weight. Double quote. Theodore Roosevelt. Jonas Salk. He was a military doctor during WW1. A completely committed, amazing pedagogue and the headmaster of a Jewish children's home during WW2 in the Warsaw Ghetto. He was given several chances to flee to Palestine, instead electing to stay with the children. Eventually he accompanied them all the way into the gas chamber to make sure they didn't have to die alone and scared. It's one level of badassery to heal for your cause. It's a whole different level of badassery to walk towards certain death for several years, endure hardship and starvation, not for some grand cause, not even to trade your life for someone else's, but only because you feel so much love towards your fellow man. To think it's your duty to make sure they won't have to die alone. Steve Irwin. It blew me away how he was able to run around all sorts of wild terrain while carrying such massive gonads. Harriet Tubman. Woman was ducking badass. Cassius Marcellus Clay Prov equals 51. He was an abolitionist politician and certified badass from Kentucky who freed all of his slaves upon inheriting his father's plantation, letting them stay and paying them a fair wage. He was the OG progressive and did not take shit from anyone. It's no wonder Muhammad Ali was named after him. What is written below isn't even 10% of the absolute badassery this man accomplished in his life. If you want the full story, check out the dollop episode in the comments. Clay had a reputation as a rebel and a fighter. Due to threats on his life, he had become accustomed to carrying 2 pistols and a knife for protection. He installed a cannon to protect his home and office. In 1845, Clay began publishing an anti-slavery newspaper, True American, in Lexington, Kentucky. Within a month he received death threats, had to arm himself, and regularly barricaded the armored doors of his newspaper office for protection, besides setting up 2 4-pounder cannons inside. During a political debate in 1843, he survived an assassination attempt by Sam Brown, a hired gun. The scabbard of Clay's Bowie knife was tipped with silver, and in jerking the Bowie knife out in retaliation pulled this scabbard up so that it was just over his heart. Sam Brown's bullet struck the scabbard and embedded itself in the silver. Despite being shot in the chest, Clay drew his Bowie knife, tackled Brown, cut out his eyes, and finally threw him over an embankment. This embankment was actually the top of the Russell Cave, for which Russell Cave Road is named after. Trivia for any of you native Lexingtonians. It's on Mt. Brilliant Farm just south of Elkhorn Creek, where the event was hosted. Clay served in the Mexican-American War as a captain with the 1st Kentucky Cavalry from 1846 to 1847. He opposed the annexation of Texas and expansion of slavery into the Southwest. While making a speech for abolition in 1849, Clay was attacked by the 6 Turner brothers, who beat, stabbed and tried to shoot him. In the ensuing fight, Clay fought off all 6 and, using his Bowie knife, killed Cyrus Turner. He was instrumental in the institution of the Emancipation Proclamation, recalled to the United States in 1862 to accept a commission from Lincoln as a major general with the Union Army. Clay publicly refused to accept it unless Lincoln would agree to emancipate slaves under Confederate control. Lincoln sent Clay to Kentucky to assess the mood for emancipation there and in the other border states. Following Clay's return to Washington, D.C., Lincoln issued the proclamation in late 1862 to take effect in January 1863. He was also appointed minister to Russia and was present for the Tsar's emancipation of the serfs. And his house has, it's still standing, an extremely early form of indoor plumbing and central heating that was revolutionary for the time. He donated 10 acres of the land to form Berea College, the first integrated co-educational college in the South. Dude led an extremely interesting life and is, in my opinion, one of the most important unknown and undiscussed figures in American history.